I'm King Link, and this week we're going to be doing a Mission Teardown of Red Dead Redemption 2. You know, that massive game cost like $100 million to make, just one of the biggest games ever. I'm going to be taking a quick moment here though. This video will be critical of Red Dead Redemption 2, however, I am going to be specifically critical of pieces of Red Dead Redemption 2. I spent maybe 80 hours here in just single player, and that's a ton of time. In general, this game is quite fun at times, but a masterpiece? It ain't. Besides, Red Dead Redemption 2 is not just Grand Theft Auto Wild West, and I think in some ways it's not really a true sequel to the original game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is more of a Wild West simulator than a typical sandbox game, and I'm going to be viewing it with that assumption. What I mean by a Wild West simulator, though, is that Red Dead Redemption 2 tries to be realistic in most things. You can still take far too much damage, auto-aim, and more, but there's also a lack of fast travel except through the stagecoach. The game wants the player to feel like they have consequences for screwing around, and the game wants you to feel like you're in a Wild West setting, or more specifically, a Western movie. For the most part, it succeeds at all this, and I'm not going to fault the game for what it wants to be. Admittedly, though, this was not what some fans wanted, and I would even say many fans, which caused a lot of backlash. However, if you are interested in Red Dead Redemption 2, let's talk about how the missions here flow, because I think that's really core to my views on Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, I personally don't have a firm methodology about which missions I'm going to be choosing for these videos. Do I choose the best mission, like in Titanfall 2, the first mission, like I did in Disco Elysium, or just cherry pick one? The fact is, I chose this week's mission because I felt like it exhibited what I really needed to talk about with Red Dead Redemption 2, but much of this is available in every single mission, which becomes one of the issues. So let's set this week's story up. Now, you're going to be sneaking back into an area where the players wanted dead or alive. Preferably dead. If the NPCs seem to have any say about it, they just shoot you on sight. Your gang left a huge pile of cash in this city of Blackwater, but more importantly for this mission, a friend, Sean. Before the mission even starts, Arthur Morgan, the main character that the player will be taking over, has to reach the mission either by fighting his way through a guarded bridge or fording the river and sneaking to his teammates. This doesn't appear to change how the missions start, but it is an interesting way to start the process. In this case, however, the guards at the bridge turned away, as you can see, and I rode over it. I guess I got lucky. Previous times this wasn't as easy. Let's just say that was a much bloodier fight that I didn't win. So, each mission really has typical things that will become important. The most obvious feature of any story mission in a Red Dead Redemption game will be the cutscene, and so this mission starts with this cutscene. Now, the cutscene and stories in Red Dead Redemption 2 are pretty strong. The graphics are great, and there are a lot of characters you will care about. Javier here hasn't really made a strong impression by this point in the story. Charles, though, a character you might see later, is one of my favorite characters in this game. He was born to an African-American father and a Native American mother, and you can really feel his struggle at times. But it is Trelawney who shines in this mission and does much of the talking throughout it. He has this way of charming everyone in the room, and it just works so well. Eventually, though, this opening cutscene will end, and the players are going to be following a boat. This is also a typical piece of Red Dead Redemption's mission structure. After the opening cutscene, almost every mission has you jump on your horse and ride somewhere else. And in this case, you're going to be following the boat, but you are following the boat. Just to be clear, this is not a further cutscene, but rather you have to hold like the A button to ride, and you're going to have to steer a little bit too. You can also turn on the cinematic camera in Red Dead Redemption 2 in certain places, and I will a few times here. This is one of the things about Red Dead Redemption 2. With great graphics and cutscenes as well as a focus on the simulation rather than just fun gameplay, it often feels like Red Dead Redemption 2 cares far more about the cinematic qualities of the game and the story rather than the action or gameplay that you will be doing in the game. And in general, riding a horse is fine, but you will be riding manually most of the time instead of just having an extended cutscene. And personally, I really wish they just went with cutscenes because it's a dull experience to ride everywhere, but you just have to hold the button and steer, otherwise you don't move forward. And like I said, almost every mission tends to have these riding sections, and almost none of them are short rides. And if you really think that they're okay, replaying a mission means you have to go on these same rides, so you're spending like maybe 5 minutes on a horse in some of these missions hearing the same dialogue. Now, at least the dialogue here is interesting, and the player is following and spotting a boat, not just riding in a general direction, but it's both uninteractive and amounts to guiding the horse because it will go off in the wrong direction if you don't hold the right direction. Now, the good news, though, is this is a relatively short trip, and from there, your team jumps off the horses, and you and Javier cross the river to silently take out the guards that Trelawney will be distracting. And this is actually a really good part of the mission. It's very unique to this mission. You won't see it in anything else. There are a few stealth missions outside of this, but not exactly like it, and it is a good section, even if this one is a bit simple. And from there, there's a feeling that you can continue the stealth, but honestly, I haven't figured out how, and I don't believe it's possible. Instead, we're getting to the other thing that's in so many missions, the gunfight. Now, I want to pause here as the gunfight's going to be playing on and mention this is a gang of bounty hunters that's taking your friend to the lawmakers to get a bounty, maybe $50. That's what I've gotten from other bounties myself. The game even references how many people there are here, and I counted at least 25 men that I had to kill on this mission as I moved on. How are there so many people here? Just remember that. We'll talk about it in a bit. Anyways, you'll gun your way through this whole crowd, and it is a huge group. The gunplay in Red Dead Redemption 2 is pretty good as it starts, though it honestly doesn't change much over the course of the game, maybe giving you some Deadeye support or different weapons. However, any single gunfight at any point in the game is pretty solid. And so you spend the next few minutes killing people, and then all that's left is shooting down Sean, or untying him if you're lame, and the mission is over with an outro cutscene. Kind of simple. I mean, every mission can't just be a cutscene, riding, special action, and gunfight in a row, right? Well, let's take a look at a mission that happens 2 missions later. In this one, our friend Micah has been jailed in Strawberry. We found out about this from Lenny in a previous mission, but we're going to have to go break him out, and admittedly, this has to be different. Well, it is. You see, you do the writing before you start the mission, as you have to travel all the way to Strawberry, which is a town you likely haven't seen before, and it is a very long ride. So, okay, a long ride before the mission starts. Sure enough, we get to the town, we go to the mission marker, and we stop by the jail. Well, what we end up having here is an optional cutscene to start the mission, if you go through the front door. And there's actually a glitch, as you'll see here, that the door won't open. You can see the mime that it does, but there's actually like a few bugs in this game like this. It's a little shocking for how much this game cost to make, how long it's been out. It's been on multiple platforms, and the fact that it's been out a year on PC, and yet there's still bugs like this. Why? I mean, this is a main story cutscene that's broken. Did anyone notice this? Alright, anyways. Micah is in jail, and it's up to Arthur to get him out. So we run around to the side of the jail. There's, again, a little cutscene here, and a kind of cool part of the mission, as I mentioned. You use the machine to take the bars, and you pull them off the gate. You actually get to use a little bit of rope physics as you're walking around. It's cool. The game does refer to dynamite, but I don't think you would have access to it at this point. Anyways, once you break Micah out, you guys can sneak out of town, right? Well, that actually would be the smart move, but Red Dead Redemption 2's story rarely plays it smart. And Micah, let's just say he's not tactically minded. He takes a gun from you, shoots his cellmate out of some old feud, and it sets off, you guessed it, another shootout. This one is a roaming shootout that takes you through the entire town, killing as you move from place to place. It's again a pretty good shootout due to the good shooting system. Not great, let's be honest. The fact you go through the entire town is kind of extreme, but okay, it's a cool moment. Eventually, you get to your horses, shoot a few more people on horseback, and both of you are free. Oh, and you shoot 33 people in a town that might not even have 33 houses. But okay, quantity over quality, I guess. So again, maybe I'm cherry picking this mission as well. I get that. I wanted to prove this conclusively. Maybe there are not as many shootouts as I'm saying. I thought 90% of missions were shootouts. That's not scientific. So I actually compiled every mission in the main story that Arthur goes through. I tried to remove any mission that wasn't required, and I found that there are 69 missions. Nice. Each mission, though, has objectives to get a gold medal. So I took the missions that have either headshot required objectives or accuracy with a gun objectives in some sort, and counted those as shooting missions, and they all are, by the way. I also found 10 missions that didn't include those specific objectives, but did include shooting, which, okay, I counted those anyways because it's my rules, my numbers. And the results, out of 69 missions, 50 included shooting. That's 72%. Not 90, but almost 3/4 of the mission will have this formula in some way. You have an opening cutscene, write a bit, have something interesting happen, and a big shootout. And we're talking 20 to 30 enemies quite often. If you do question this, I will link to the spreadsheet in the description. Just realize there will be some spoilers, length, and how many chapters, so on. So listen, as good as the gunplay is in Red Dead Redemption 2, and it is good as I've said, I think that's too much, and a lot of these come back to back. I've already heard the counter-arguments, of course. You're an outlaw! And yeah, outlaws, however, don't stay alive by shooting everyone they could. In fact, the amount of blood spilt in some of these missions alone would make these guys public enemy number one, no matter where they went. And I mean, maybe after like 2 or 3 missions of this, how many 100 men could you kill before everyone would be after you? Beyond that, though, a lot of these concepts are done over and over. When saving Micah, I shot up a town, and it was a really cool moment. I also shot up another 4 towns, including the same town twice later on in the game. Later on, you actually do a bank robbery, which happens at least 2 or 3 times as part of the main story. Train robberies are a huge thing in westerns. I mean, even Back to the Future 3, the least western, has one. You rob 4 trains just in the story. And yes, each of these missions are different, but doing the same action slightly different isn't enough for a different experience. Robbing a bank could be a cool side mission, but instead doing it 2 or 3 times in the story gets old, even if they're different. And it doesn't feel like your gang is evolving at all, which, okay, maybe that's the point. And while you are an outlaw, there's so much more that could have been done. You know, you could lie, cheat, steal. There's so many different things that you could do that would be wrong, but it didn't have to be shooting every time. All Red Dead Redemption 2, though, wants to do is get you into yet another shootout. There's even a mission where you steal some sheep, herd them to town. Interesting concept there, and pretty cool. And then, because it is Red Dead Redemption 2, you have another town shootout, because that's the only thing the developer thought was fun or interesting, it seems. What's really strange is, there are stranger side missions which are very interesting, and there are other content in the game that works oh so well. And I had a blast with this game, but only when I wasn't following the story. There are also missions like the one on the screen where you go drinking with Lenny, and it's a fun and interesting moment where you bond with the character. This mission has no gunfighting or real combat. Why couldn't they just put more of these types of missions in there? There is a good amount of them, but there could be more to build the story better. Now, just to be clear, you can take almost any mission in Red Dead Redemption 2, lift it, put it into any other game as pretty much anything, even just a dream sequence, and that mission would be the highlight of that other game's entire experience. The mission design here is really good, but the problem is it becomes a cookie-cutter experience that gets repeated so often, it loses all of its luster. The big finale in the entire game is a boring letdown because it's just another shootout, and it's been like every other shootout in the game. At that point, I was so sick of the shooting mechanics and had been for hours by that point. A big part of my issue is the number of people you're going to kill. There are points where you will have like a small quick draw against 1, 2, maybe even 4 opponents, and it's a fun, exciting moment. But then you layer in missions where you kill like 20 or 30 people. The shooting becomes boring, and that's assuming you don't die and have to start a section over, so you're killing even more. I'd even consider forgiving the amount of shooting if many of these sections were only like 5 or 6 guys, but instead we're often talking about double digits because that's the only way the gunfights are challenging or maybe even interesting. But what really doesn't help Red Dead Redemption 2 is the story itself. Admittedly, the graphics and cutscenes are extremely good, but the story here is also kind of repetitive. The game starts with the gang on the run and the leader of the group, Dutch, wanting to pull more jobs for his gang's survival. Quick side note though, this is a prequel to the original Red Dead Redemption. In that game, you play as John Marston, a character in this one, as well as chasing down Dutch, Bill Williamson, and you eventually will be living with Uncle. I'm only pointing all of this out though because we know major characters are not going to die, and sometimes they're put into dangerous situations that it becomes impossible to care about. This is the same flaw as a person telling a flashback where they themselves are about to be killed. It doesn't create suspense. We know that he survived. Just stop doing this. But the other problem with Red Dead Redemption 2's story is that the first 2 acts of the 3-act structure, I'm trying to avoid spoilers on length here, but that's also why the stuff in the background is showing the early cutscenes. But for the first 2/3 of the game, the entire story is one note. You go somewhere, pull some jobs, go to a second location, do the same stuff. What's worse is Grand Theft Auto 5 had a similar story, but I think it was done better. It also sticks to the one more job mantra, but instead there are reasons that Michael, Franklin, and Trevor have to keep working to pull one more job over and over. Admittedly, neither of these games is Shakespeare, but at least there are reasons it worked in Grand Theft Auto 5, even if it wasn't perfect. But Grand Theft Auto 5 also had missions that had other gameplay than just shooting everyone you see. I believe people complained, and that's why Rockstar actually swung so hard in the other direction, making everything gunfights, but it made Red Dead Redemption 2's story a chore to get through because it's all the same concept. I personally would have loved to have like a 2 or 3 mission arc where Arthur is setting up a bigger score with no combat. That's the one thing they miss at least once in the game. And there could have been a single huge heist mission like in GTA 5. Those were like the best missions for a lot of reasons, and the big mission could have that big sexy shootout that Red Dead Redemption 2 constantly is trying to do. But instead, everything here is combat, so none of it's really that important. And before I get to the conclusion, I also want to quickly mention the bounty system kind of sucks. Just screwing around or shooting up a town outside a mission means you'll have to pay off a bounty. The random fun that people liked in Grand Theft Auto games is now heavily penalized, and what's worse is there's no way to reduce the bounty without paying it off. And that mission before with Micah where we shoot up a town got me like an $80 bounty. So basically I have to pay money after beating that mission, so even just beating a mission as requested creates more issues. Of course, bounties don't seem to have a lot of purpose. I'm in areas with dead or alive and no one seems to come after me, but whatever. Like I said though, not everything here is horrible. The third act in Red Dead Redemption 2 is actually great, and I think the game ends with some of its strongest storytelling. I also think that's why so many reviewers praise Red Dead Redemption 2 and the story and the gameplay. But the thing is here, you're sitting through 60 hours or so of very weak gameplay and storytelling to get to that superior final act. That doesn't make it a good game. I'm personally getting a little sick of reviews of games that ignore major faults of the game while giving 9s and 10s just because the game has a huge budget or there's so much content. The fact is, if the main story isn't great, how can you give it a great score? And I think I could solve many of the problems in Red Dead Redemption 2's story with a little work. With the gang on the run in the first act, that could have actually been delayed 10 or 15 hours. You could cut maybe a fourth or a half of the first 2/3 of the game and instead show Dutch's gang at the height in Blackwater. Maybe even show that they are running things without severe violence and no major problems, and were more controlled. Thus, when it goes out of control later, you understand the evolution. Basically just show kind of a ruthless gang, but before the fall that leads to that first mission here. That time period is actually never shown, and you wouldn't even have to show the infamous boat mission that's mentioned multiple times, but again, never really explained. You could still shroud that in mystery, but showing an earlier point for the gang would lead to a stronger story later on for the later arcs. Again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here. I could really tear this game down mission from mission, chapter from chapter, but we won't. I'm hoping people who have played the game understand what I'm talking about there, though. Also, I want to also say these complaints are really specific to the mission structure. Red Dead Redemption 2's free roaming is amazing. There's a huge wealth of content and a ton of great gameplay. Hunting and tracking animals are really interesting once you understand what you're doing, and it's actually not even required for any main mission. Several stranger missions feel so good. I'm actually more disappointed at the main story for being so cookie cutter. You can run into interesting random events. You can probably play Red Dead Redemption 2 for maybe 100 hours without playing a single story mission, or at least after unlocking everything to get to that point. I will admit, though, I hold Red Dead Redemption 2 to a higher standard. This is Rockstar. This is the company that should be at the forefront of open-world games. It's a company that spared no expense on this title, at least we're meant to believe that. We've all heard about the horse testicles, which probably took like 10 hours, but there's so much work that went into this entire game. I don't get it. That's why I really struggle with this game, because it feels like there's so much passion poured into almost every part of Red Dead Redemption 2 by people who just wanted to make the most amazing game or the amazing system or the amazing content, and they really cared about it. It's just a shame that almost none of that passion got poured into the story and the main missions, because it really holds the entire game back, and the fact that you will have to play through those missions to unlock more of the game is disappointing. Do I hate Red Dead Redemption 2 though? No, I actually don't even dislike this game. I still heavily recommend it. But I also can't ignore the huge problems and the fact that so many publications and people praise this game for its perfection. It's a perfection that this game doesn't have. The good news, though, is now that I'm done with the story in my playthrough, I can just ride the range and find other stuff to do, which will be parts of the game that I'm almost guaranteed to enjoy far more than the story. Of course, there is also online mode as well, but the less said about that microtransaction grindy hell, the better. But I hope I've explained some of the issues and thoughts I've had on Red Dead Redemption 2. I did consider making this into a comparison between GTA and Red Dead, but I think the issues here are clear on their own. Still, I hope you enjoyed this. Now, if you did, consider sticking around and joining my posse, and of course by that I mean clicking subscribe and ringing that bell. Or let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you honestly think Red Dead Redemption 2 is a masterpiece? Do you think I'm being too harsh? Or is there another reason that I missed that you disliked in this game? Now that I've finished this journey, I kind of want to talk more about Red Dead Redemption 2, even though most people have moved on. I'll be popping up 2 videos here, my quest teardown for Disco Elysium, which is a fantastic game, and my comparison of Hades and Dead Cells that people seem to like a lot. We'll be doing something similar next month. Until then, however, I am King Link, and thank you very much for watching.